It was one of those miracles.
There you go. La ilaha illallah. All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing our tafsir, but this time we're going to go and get into some of the topics.
The screen is the screen supposed to be showing something?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I just see nothing. There we go.
There we go. Good job, Noura. All right. So, inshallah, today we're going to be continuing the subject that we were talking about yesterday, which definitely is within this ayah. And يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون. So we were really going within speaking about al-khamr. We talked about a couple of things. We talked about how in usul al-fiqh, I'm just going to go backwards, how in usul al-fiqh, the word tahrim, or using the word, for example, such and such is haram on you, is not necessarily the only terminology and the only method to specify that something is forbidden or something is acceptable. So there can be different terminologies used, and certainly فَاجْتَنِبُوا, or the word لَا تَقْرَبُوا, don't even get near such and such, for example, like لَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, or right there speaking about alcohol, فَاجْتَنِبُوا, speaking about alcohol. Well, those are considered, let's just use just examples. When we're saying something haram, well, that doesn't mean, think of it as a red zone. But when you're talking about فَاجْتَنِبُوا or even لَا تَقْرَبُوا, that's actually going farther than a red zone. It's exactly like giving you, the red zones and giving you the alarm system, and everything's just, right there telling you that this is extremely serious. Don't even approach. So we went in some of that detail in terms of different words that are used. The word rijs. We also went into some details with the word rijs and what does it really mean, and then the differences of opinions between scholars. Is this metaphorical or is this literal? And then, of course, the implication of that debate. If, for example, some alcohol were to probably drip, splash, or squirt on somebody's garment, is that alcohol necessarily something that should be treated the same way that we would treat, let's say, the impurity of urine, for example, or other substances, or is this completely different? So that's the implication of that debate, and certainly when we went in terms of alcohol and the different things that are haram. And we mentioned some stories about alcohol, how during the time of the Prophet we had, because they were still, of course, addicted to drinking. We talked about some of the reasons of revelation. We talked about the story of Amr ibn al-As when they were having like a barbecue and in a whole jug of alcohol, and they started then speaking about, using the tribal rhetoric that they had in the past, and they were using it while they were drunk, and then they ended up really going violent with each other because they weren't even aware of what they were doing. And then that resulted in the Prophet ﷺ getting the second ayah revealed, and we went in some details in talking about the different gradual process that actually happened in order to get to get the Muslims, of course, I guess, trained this therapy to get them from one station to another station, from a station where they're not completely addicted to later on another station where they're reducing the amount to a certain level when it was only to drink during the night. And then later on, of course, bring about, well, before that, let me say, it was giving an indication that there's إثمهما أكبر من نفعهما, letting them know that there is lots of harm in it, and then giving them, I guess, this sense to really feel that, well, if there's a lot of harm, does that mean that that's the right thing to choose? And it wasn't until Umar ibn al-Khattab started making the dua, Allahumma atina fil khamri bayanan shafiya. Ya Allah, give us in al-khamr or in alcohol a clear statement, something that would bring about a final clear statement for us to know whether it is haram or not. And we also talked about the story of Ali ibn Abi Talib when Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib had actually, I guess, somehow harmed the hump of Ali ibn Abi Talib's camels. And then, of course, he disrespected the Prophet ﷺ with his words, but the Prophet ﷺ didn't comment on that while he was drunk. And we talked about the implications, should we, in situations where someone might actually be drunk. Now, when you look at Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib, you want to remember that Hamza was killed during the Battle of Uhud, okay? But the Prophet ﷺ yet didn't get the final statement in regards to drinking until a little past Uhud. And Uhud was after the Battle of Badr, and the Battle of Uhud happened in the 3rd year Hijrah. And the Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib was actually killed in the Battle of Uhud. And of course, remember, so if we're talking about the Battle of Uhud, Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib was killed in the Battle of Uhud, and it wasn't until a little later, after the Battle of Uhud, did the ayah that we just read, إِنَّمَا الْخَمْرُ وَالْمَيْسِرُ وَالْأَنْصَابُ وَالْأَزْلَامُ رِجْسٌ مِّنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. That wasn't revealed until a little later after Uhud. So when Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib had, I guess, mentioned things unaware of what he was saying, did the Prophet ﷺ necessarily scold him? And we went in details in the implication that is a person held accountable and, of course, responsible for the words that they might say, such as a divorce or maybe an oath or different things that in a regular situation we would hold a person accountable for what they're saying. And certainly it can go as far, if we're not going to hold them accountable for what they're saying, are we going to hold them accountable for what they're doing? And we said if we're not going to hold them accountable for what they're doing, well, imagine how far that would go, and everybody probably trying to prove that they were drunk on that day to get away with it. And certainly people not going to, let's say, drink responsibly or be responsible for their for what they're consuming and thinking that they could just get away with it. So that was one thing that we had also mentioned. So now we're going to go for the rest. Those are they were 13 or 17, 13 points, I believe. So let's go ahead with the story that we promised to start out with, which is point number 7. Point number 7, it was a rather ironic story. Let's look at this. Muslim had narrated that Abdullah ibn Abbas said, أن رجلا أهدى لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم راوية خمر فقال له رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هل علمت أن الله حرمها؟ قال لا. قال فسار إنسانا فقال له رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بما ساررته؟ قال أمرته ببيعها. فقال إن الذي حرم شربها حرم بيعها. قال ففتح المزادة حتى ذهب ما فيها. What is the story here? So you could see that the story is narrated in Sahih Muslim, and it's also in the story of Musnad Ahmad. So let's see what happened. So a man wanted to do the Prophet ﷺ a favor. Well, he really wanted to give him a nice gift, I guess. So what did he do? He actually went to the Prophet ﷺ and gave him a whole jug of alcohol. So the Prophet ﷺ said, did you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbidden that? He said, no. So another guy that was sitting in the group whispered something in his ear. Then the Prophet ﷺ tells him, what did you whisper in his ear? And he said, I just ordered him to sell it. So the Prophet ﷺ said, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbidden drinking it and forbidden selling it. So the guy that was giving that gift, he opened the jug up and basically and just spilled everything that was in it. In other words, disposed everything that was in it. A couple things to learn from here. Number one, the story is really rather interesting. Number one, not everyone was at the same level of fiqh, even though the Prophet ﷺ did send someone out going in Medina, and everybody was basically, I guess, talking about how alcohol was forbidden, and that was really going to be changing the whole culture within Medina. But still, some people managed to not get the news, to the point that they would actually come and give a gift like alcohol to the Prophet ﷺ. So just because somebody is a Sahabi, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're at the same level of fiqh as another Sahabi. In other words, Sahaba actually vary and differ in their level of ilm in Islam, in their closeness to the Prophet ﷺ, in their update about Islam and about that information, which later on was actually a key reason why you had some Sahaba probably didn't have the same level of fiqh as probably Umar ibn al-Khattab or even Ali ibn Abi Talib or Sayyida Aisha, etc., because those were, let's say, the really close ones, the ones that are probably in the highest level of updated knowledge in Islam, in the fiqh of the Prophet ﷺ and all of that. So we're talking about, number one, we're speaking about the four khulafa. We're talking about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, we're talking about Umar ibn Khattab, Uthman bin Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Those were the most updated. Then you had Sayyida Aisha, of course, was very updated. Salama was very updated. And you also had, well, Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab, or is it Abdullah ibn Abbas? But really, Abdullah ibn Abbas was way younger than Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. Way younger. We're speaking about a huge age difference, and we're definitely talking about if we have or Abdullah ibn Abbas was also one of those fuqaha as-Sahaba as well. So you had Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, a huge age difference between him and Zayd ibn Thabit. So in sometimes when you're learning about the Sahaba, it's important to learn about at least the approximate age of how old they were when they had become Muslim, when I guess a certain battle happened, just to kind of give you an idea, I guess, the context in their life. Age is not just a number, but it also has an implication on a person's power, on a person's psychology. And certainly when you look at, for example, Zawaj al-Mut'a marriage, Abdullah ibn Abbas was one of those Sahaba that said that Mut'a marriage was permissible. But Ali ibn Abi Talib was actually the one that narrated that Mut'a marriage was not permissible. And that was during the Battle of Khaybar. And you look at the age difference, this is actually key. When you're talking about the Battle of Khaybar, you're talking about Ali ibn Abi Talib narrated the hadith that the last thing the Prophet ﷺ had forbidden in regards to one, mut'a marriage, two, in regards to eating donkey's meat, and certainly when Ali ibn Abi Talib said, well, the Prophet ﷺ said that that was going to be the final statement till Judgment Day. What is that telling us? Well, that's telling us in comparison to Abdullah ibn Abbas, when Ali ibn Abi Talib had announced that the Prophet ﷺ, or heard the Prophet ﷺ's announcement, Abdullah ibn Abbas was only 10 years old. A 10-year-old doesn't necessarily, let me say, care about marriage as somebody that is probably 28 or 30-year-old who even wanted to attempt to get a second wife and get married to a second woman while he was still married to Fatima bint Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, there's a huge difference between a guy that's in his, late 20s and between a child that's in his, even preteen. And certainly you could see some of the implications in terms of age and how it might actually play a role. In looking at this hadith, we saw that this Sahabi didn't even know, despite the announcement that was made. Let's go move on right there. هل علمت أن الله حرمها? Did you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded it as forbidden? So what does that mean? That is to show us that we cannot hold somebody accountable unless they actually have the ilm about it. In other words, before we would talk, especially during our time, not many people are aware of the different rulings of Islam. And before we probably start going to stage 2 and probably talking to them, and let's say now I would say before being judgmental, okay? Because if you're talking about being judgmental, now I would say certainly this is a fair context to use it in. But if you're talking about the context that many would use it in, don't be judgmental. In other words, don't call out something being haram, and they'll probably use another, I would say, satanic narrative and call it haram police. If you do, that's a satanic narrative. Because if you're going to say that that's a haram police, are you going to call the Prophet ﷺ haram police right here too? Absolutely not. If you call the Prophet ﷺ haram police, that's kufr on the spot. That's kufr on the spot, because there's nothing more derogatory than somehow thinking and using that, yes, this is just going as a person that is just attacking people. That's what it means to say haram police. That's another way of trying to say that a person is just attacking people for something haram that they're doing. Well, that's what a police does. Isn't a police supposed to be there to make sure that security and the law is being applied? So if you're calling a person that is doing al-hisbah a haram police, well, then right there, you're really getting into that accusation, accusing the Prophet ﷺ of him being a haram police. That's kufr on the spot. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and whoever considers the glorification or the sanctity of the different positions, the different borders, the different parameters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's principles, then in that situation, that's a reflection that the person's heart had really absorbed taqwa. Because they cannot stand seeing haram and not do anything about it. They needed to do something, whether it's give you an advice, whether it's probably even going farther. If they know that you already know the advice, but then you don't know how to stop, probably go out there and even, snatch probably the alcohol from your hand and boom, right there, break it. Can we go that level? Certainly you can, if that isn't going to bring a bigger haram. So if the person probably you snatched the alcohol from their hand and probably if you broke it, but that person was going to consider that, yes, thank you, you had really helped me that day. You really, you know what, you would do that when the person respects their relationship with you, considers that you're just trying to do them a favor. But if you're doing it to a person that's probably going to take a different stance, perhaps even attempt to kill you or probably attack you in a way that might actually lead to a dangerous fight and put you in danger, then in that situation, we would say whenever you would want to order for what is right and what is wrong, make sure it doesn't lead to a bigger harm. If it leads to a bigger wrong, you know what? Let's just stick to the smaller wrong if you're anticipating that that was going to lead to something even far more dangerous. So when we see هل علمت أن الله حرمها? Did you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarded it haram? Well, the man just said, no, I didn't even know it was haram. The Prophet ﷺ, did he attack him? No, he didn't. So that's when someone else was just sitting down in the group and he started whispering in his ear. But it's really strange. I wonder what the motive behind whispering in the ear was for. Was it whispering in the ear? Probably just feeling sad that he was going to lose his money. Or did he whisper in his ear because he didn't want to somehow disrespect the Prophet ﷺ, and then he just gave him that whisper? Well, what was he whispering? He was telling him, the Prophet ﷺ then asked him, what did you whisper? And he said, "Amartuhu bibay'iha." I just ordered him to just sell it. In other words, if he is not going to be taking it, well, and you're not allowed to drink it, just go sell it and make a fortune out of this. So the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الَّذِي حَرَّمَ شُرْبَهَا حَرَّمَ بَيْعَهَا. The one that had forbidden drinking it had already forbidden selling it. And from this sentence, remember this is an authentic hadith, from this sentence, there is a qaida fiqhiyya. What is the qaida fiqhiyya? A qaida fiqhiyya just means we've got different rulings and we'll have one law, think of it as a formula, and rather than memorizing so many different rules, we'll just use one concept or one rule, a general statement to help us memorize and put together in a formula a set of different rules to help us, I guess, canonize fiqh. What is that rule? ما حرم أخذه حرم عطاؤه. All right, let's see. What does that mean? That way you'll memorize it for the rest of your life and just know. And instead of asking too many questions in fiqh, all you need to do is basically just learn a couple rules and voila, you'll be a scholar in fiqh and with very little to memorize. ما حرم أخذه حرم عطاؤه. Can you explain that in English? What is forbidden or what was forbidden to take is forbidden to keep. Is forbidden to keep. Simple as that. If it's haram for you to take that, then it's forbidden to keep, to give. Not to, well, if it's haram for you to take it, that means you cannot pass it on. You cannot give it. All right? Can I give my friend that is probably Catholic a cross necklace, for example? The answer is no. If it's haram to take, then it's haram to give. Can I give perhaps not necessarily alcohol, but let's say drugs? I'm just selling. I'm not consuming it. If it's haram to take, it's haram to give. Okay? It takes the same exact ruling. If it's haram to take, it's haram to give. Let's see. So he said, إن الذي حرم شربها حرم بيعها. قال ففتح المزاد حتى ذهب ما فيها. What is المزادة? المزادة is that راوية itself. Okay, so what does it look like? Well, it basically was a container, whether it was made of glass or whether it was made of, I guess, a container that was probably made of maybe leather, or whether it was made of pottery. Allahu A'lam what it was made of. But at the end of the day, by the way, we used to sell this pottery. Remember, I used to work with my father. Wasn't too long, it was like a year, but there was this pottery that was made looking like a shoe. I don't know why they would make it look like a shoe, but it was made looking like a shoe. And that pottery was almost 3,000 years old, and, well, 3,000 something years old. And my father was selling it for $28,000. I wonder if he sold it. But is it haram to sell that one? The answer is no. Well, why not? You just said that the guy just opened that pottery up and spilled what's in it. Well, remember, the guy opened that utensil. He didn't throw the whole thing. No, he definitely فَفَتَحَ الْمَزَادَةَ حَتَّى ذَهَبَ مَا فِيهَا. He opened, in other words, he kept the utensil, whether that was a pottery, whatever it is, but then he spilled what was in it. But he still kept the utensil that was holding such substance, but didn't get rid of that. He just got rid of what was in it. Okay? So from that, the scholars said that the actual glass, for example, okay, the actual glass or the actual utensil. And then we went in differences of opinions during one time with Surah Al-Ma'idah, and we talked about the pottery, if there was alcohol in it, or if there was pork in it, cooked in it, can we use that again? Or do we have to wash it? Do we have to, boil some water in it and then spill it and all of that? We went in details with that. But at least let's, stick to learning to at least within what this hadith is teaching us. Let's see. So he said, and this hadith is indicating that the actual, if there is, of course, manfa'a in general, we would assume that he could have just sold it and didn't drink it and just made money and just, okay, the Prophet ﷺ said it was haram. I won't drink it, but I'll just make a fortune out of it. I'll sell it. But the Prophet ﷺ in general, this whole wording is basically to teach us that you cannot live in contradiction with your principles. You have to be consistent with the principles that you follow. You have to be consistent with, of course, that whatever you really would want for yourself, you basically, the golden rule, you would basically consider it what you would want for yourself, you would also consider it to be also applied on someone else. In other words, don't live in some sort of a contradiction, an oxymoron with your principles. No, you stick to the principles and you live the principles and you apply the same principles on yourself, and you don't go applying something different on someone else. It's being consistent with yourself. All right. So what about if we're speaking about, all right, we're speaking about, does that same rule apply when we talked about that leather What about leather? Remember when we said that when we're speaking about leather, what if it's of a dead animal? Let's say we had a dead goat, or we found, I don't know, Noora was with her husband walking in India, somewhere in the jungle, and she found a tiger. They found a dead tiger.
It's
So,
kind of ironic you said that because my husband almost hit a deer the other day with his car. And the car behind him actually hit the deer.
oh, okay, okay. So let's just say, okay, that the deer, okay, what if they were to say Bismillah and Wallahu Akbar and boom, just to get out of the differences of opinions. It's like, okay, here we go. I could just hit the deer, and if I basically kill it right there, and I can probably slaughter it, let's just say it's not illegal, okay, and I can right there slaughter it, whether that would be a dhabiha, that would be a sayd, that would be a hunting. Noora would be making, I guess, ma'lube with deer. Oh, the deer meat is pretty good. It's very delicious. So Noora, you can probably, go with your husband deer hunting. Okay. Now let us assume that no, it was actually killed by something, who knows what it was, but then right in the middle of the highway, they just saw a dead deer. Well, Noora's husband thought, well, what we could do is probably, I mean, we can't eat it, but we could probably take the leather and then we could use the leather for probably, hey, we could take it back to Syria and someone would, before it decays, we can make sure that we could tan it before it decays. We'll tan it, we'll do what is necessary, put some vinegar and salt and dry it up and, do this process a couple of times until it completely gets tanned. And we can probably take it to maybe a place that can make something out of it, maybe a nice leather coat or something like that. Can we actually do that? Well, that's a differences of opinions between scholars, because some scholars, they actually said, when inna alladhi harrama shurbaha harrama bay'aha. And they said, well, there is another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ had actually forbidden them to make use of that dead goat and even make use of its even leather. There is another report that is actually contradictory to that report. This report is that the Prophet ﷺ, when he had seen a dead goat, he said, هَلَّا أَخَذْتُمْ إِهَابَهَا فَدَبَغْتُمُوهُ فَانْتَفَعْتُمْ بِهِ. Would you not take its own leather, its own skin, and then tan it and make use of it? And you could see that this hadith was narrated in Ahmad, narrated in Bukhari, narrated in Muslim, which actually means it is authentic. Well, this idea is definitely, well, if it is haram to take and basically consume this goat, why was it halal to do the opposite, which is basically tan it and then probably sell it, or even they don't have to sell it, they can probably just themselves use it. So if you said what is haram to take is haram to give, well, why wasn't it applied here? You see what I'm saying? Why wasn't it applied here? So right there, you didn't apply the rule. Certainly, we cannot consume this goat because it's a carry-on. It's basically dead meat. We can't consume it. But can we use that skin, the leather at least, the fur, the whatever that was on there, and just tan it and make use of it, whether it's sell it or use it for our own purpose? So that's why you may have differences of opinions on how far can a certain rule extend. How far do we go in applying rule A or rule B, and how do we understand, of course, the application and where this applies. So just a note, of course, you can have differences of opinions on the place where we would apply it in, and you could also have differences of opinions on how it is applied, because we can go, well, yes, certainly it's haram to eat, but it's not necessarily haram to use its skin and use its leather, according to some scholars. Other scholars, they considered that no, just like you cannot eat it, you cannot use its leather, period, because they considered that the leather would be najis, would be impure, even if you were to tan it. And they also use that other hadith, which is less authentic than this one. So just a note, and then they'll go into a debate whether this report came first or whether that report came first or second. The reason why is because if we have, let's say, an evidence that this was the last thing that the Prophet ﷺ reported, well, that would abrogate the previous report. Is it possible that the Prophet ﷺ could have said both? It is possible. Why? How is that even possible? Is he contradicting himself? No, remember that there is the process that when Islam was revealed, the gradual process in delivering the rulings was actually taking a time span of 23 years, just as you had alcohol at one point be permissible and then later on become haram. Then we would look at the previous ayat, the previous hadith that involved drinking and how the Prophet ﷺ didn't say anything about it. That was before the final statement. That was before the final statement. And same thing here. So this is before the final statement, and therefore it could definitely be that this would be the final statement. Okay, let's continue right there. أجمع المسلمون على تحريم بيع الخمر والدم. That scholars, all Muslims had, when we say أجمع المسلمون, this is talking about scholars, this is talking about Muslims, this is talking about laymen. They had unanimously agreed upon the idea that alcohol drinking is not permissible and that it would be impermissible to consume and impermissible to sell, whether we're speaking about alcohol or whether we're speaking about blood. And he said, and that's a sign that anything that is considered impure or other impure things, well, that is not permitted. You're not permitted to consume it. Then therefore, you would basically be prohibited from selling it. Well, from that implication, of course, you had, it's kind of like from that inspiration, let's say, you had some scholars consider that it was not permissible to sell animal droppings, or perhaps the different different droppings, or their basically feces are actually considered great fertilizers. So some scholars, like Malik himself, had basically considered that it was hated to sell those substances, even if it was as fertilizers. And you had who's Ibn al-Qasim? Ibn al-Qasim, along with Ibn Sahnun, they were direct students for Malik. So you could see here it said رخص فيه ابن القاسم لما فيه من المنفعة. Yet the student for Imam Malik, he considered that it was permissible because there is some benefit out of it. And he basically considered that, well, what we would basically consider is that if the person is not going to consume it as food, but going to consume it in a way that is bringing in good fertilization for the plants and for the food food for the plants, then in that situation we don't have to just dump it, but we could still sell it, and we would know that they're not going to use it any other way. But let's just assume, okay, hypothetically speaking, for the sake of ara'aytum, let's just assume that these people used such substances for something else. Let's give an example. When we're looking at actual impurity, let's say we're speaking about sewage water. Can you actually use that? Well, right now they would do a process, and sometimes they would make this water and they would let it go through some process, and then they would basically make it pure again. Or is it pure again? Or wait a minute, so what is the process anyways? So it goes through a heating process, and then it becomes vapor, and then this vapor, they would collect it, and then they would basically collect it in water and basically sell it to drink, or even probably sell it to people's own consumption, okay? And let's say another example. What if we're speaking about some substances there and they make makeup from sewage stuff? Yeah, makeup. Yes, makeup. Yeah, so, and these ladies actually think that it completely looks good on you. Okay. All right. Enough of that. Let's get into a topic. We don't want to imagine all of that stuff. Okay. Now, the question is it halal? Well, let's just say they discovered Sephora. I'm not here marketing, in contrast. And then we discovered that Sephora actually uses a lot of this substance, and then they would put these kind of chemicals on it in order to, I guess, get into this process. There's a certain word. I want you to look at this word, okay? Now, this word was something that Imam Malik, well, basically he said that al-istihlal. What is al-istihlal? So if something goes to some form of istihala, what is al-istihala? Al-istihala, where this substance, it basically transformed into another substance. And let's give an example. You had khamr itself. They used, I guess, some process, and this chemical process, they would know how to do it. And it basically, they turned it from khamr into perhaps vinegar. It's a chemical process. They'll know what to do to turn this khamr, which is a chemical substance that has alcohol in it, into vinegar, which is a different chemical substance. Now, this is called istihala. What is istihala? In other words, it turned from one substance to another. It's a chemical process that basically turns something, and it is not related to the previous substance. Okay. And is that permissible? Let's give another example. If we're speaking about perhaps gelatin. So we're talking about right there, they're getting this foam stuff after boiling it for a long time from boiling bones. And then they would get this foam, and then they would collect it and put it in some chemicals to make it become a substance that is, I guess, somewhat elastic, or, you know, kind of like a jello, etc. And then they would use it probably in food, probably use it in medicines, all these different things. Is that permissible to use? Same thing when we're talking about collagen. Yeah, same thing. They'll get these substance and with chemical processing. So think of istihala as chemical process to turn it into something else. Is that permissible or not? Well, that's a huge debate between scholars. First, they'll debate with, of course, biochemists, probably, whether it really, and the biochemists themselves will debate whether it really turned into a completely different chemical. That's number one. And then, of course, how far are we talking about a completely different chemical? We're not talking about grapes into raisins. That's the same substance. We're not talking about grapes into raisins. We're talking about grapes into probably alcohol or grapes into vinegar. Okay, that's a completely different substance, a completely different substance, a completely different, let's call it chemistry. Okay, and that's the same thing. So then the scholars will debate. If we're talking about things like gelatin, okay, they put all these chemical things. Yes, we already know that the source of this gelatin was actually pork, but then they put in all these substances in it. And then certainly if they wanted to do further investigation, they would be capable of knowing that the DNA within this gelatin is pork, or whether it's not pork, in other words, beef gelatin, etc. But then the scholars of fiqh will debate, do we really need to go that far into saying, well, we're in the DNA, we would know that this is originally pork, or whether this is originally beef, or whether it's a halal dhabiha or not? Do we really have to go that far? Because we just need to see the general thing according to Scholars A. Scholars A will say, well, if it went through the process and it's not the same thing, it doesn't contain the same substance, then therefore that would be halal. If it is, let's say, gelatin, maybe made for vitamin supplements and all these different things, then their Scholars A will say, well, that's because it's a completely different process. It's a completely different subject and material right now, a completely different object, sorry. Then it should be halal. Scholars B, they say, did we know, and do we know the origin of this? Scholars A say, well, yeah, of course we know it was pork gelatin. And they say, thank you. Since you had known that it was pork gelatin, and you know that the process was done in order to shape this pork gelatin into an actual new substance, but you already know that this new substance is not completely new substance, it's just reshaping and modifying some chemistry within it, but you already know that it's actually pork gelatin. So that's another debate. And of course, they'll go into this debate. Well, yeah, but it went through a substance. We don't necessarily got to go to the DNA of it and etc. Now we could say it's a completely new substance, just exactly like we would discuss that right here. Can we actually turn alcohol into khal, into vinegar? So you had majority of the scholars. The word jumhur actually means majority. And just when you know that majority of the scholars said that, that actually tells you that there is a considerable opinion that not all scholars agreed with this opinion, but the majority said one particular opinion. What did the majority say? The majority had said that it is impermissible to turn alcohol into vinegar. In other words, to return everything and consume it and make use of it if you had already known that this wine is wine, then to say, well, I'm buying this wine because I'm actually wanting to do red wine, red vinegar. It's red wine vinegar. I'm not using it as an alcohol. So majority of the scholars would say, well, wait a minute. You cannot turn it into vinegar, and therefore, if that was permissible, then the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have let the man just open up this gift that he had brought and basically let him just spill the whole thing. He would have just told him to basically just make use of that, turn it into vinegar, and not just watch him just spill that treasure right there, because it costs money. It costs time. It costs effort. He could have made a good fortune out of it. But of course, when the scholars, they consider that that's right there not permissible to do, they would remember that scholars A and scholars B, the scholars A that said it was permissible to transform and use probably pork gelatin in supplements or probably in certain foods. Scholars A, they said, well, because it went through a different substance. It went through an istihala. It became a new substance. Scholars B, they said it didn't become a new substance because we already know that the origin of it is such a substance, and therefore it's just reshaping it. They considered that it's exactly like talking about grapes to raisins. And they said that would be haram. Scholars A, they said, no, it's not grape to raisins. Why not? They said, well, that's like grape juice. That's like grape to, well, that's like grape or grape to probably a completely different substance. I can't think of something right now. Okay. But they basically said it's a completely different thing. Grape to water. Maybe. If we're probably heating that grape juice, okay, we're heating the grape juice, there's going to be some vapor coming out of it. Certainly it will turn into molasses in the beginning, of course, but then what if I were to collect the vapor that was coming out of the grape juice? I don't know why I would want to do that, but let's just assume we're collecting this vapor that's coming out of the grape juice being boiled, and can we use this water that just evaporated from that grape juice that was boiled? Okay, so according to scholars A, they said, well, this is the same thing. Let's just assume that this person boiled alcohol. They boiled alcohol and they collected the vapor that's coming out of the alcohol. Scholars A will say, we went through a new process. It's halal. Scholars B will say, well, wait a minute, what did you just do? You recognize that alcohol in itself is haram to deal with. And using this process is really nothing but faking yourself and really manipulating yourself. So that's what, not that scholars B said that the vapor that's coming out is haram, okay? They didn't say that, but I'm just, trying to hypothetically give you an example of what this might look like, okay? They didn't say that vapor is haram. Okay, let's see. What if a person, let's say you were a guest with a friend, and this friend, you didn't know that they were drinking, and all of a sudden, just brings in this bottle of wine and says, hey, this is what I was doing. And then you right there said, this is haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hold you accountable. You basically tried to give them the maw'idha, but then they insisted that, no, it's none of your business. And you know very well that if you were to break it, that they just won't get the chance to drink it. They won't attack you. It wasn't going to go for probably an attack, a violent attack, and probably a bigger darar and a bigger harm. But no, it was just going to be just the price probably of that bottle of wine. And he just said that bottle of wine costed like $130. And then now he's coming forward and saying, hey, you owe me $130 because you broke my bottle of wine, thinking that you were doing da'wah, Mr. Haram Police. So he wanted to come forward. Do I have to compensate for that bottle of wine? So the first opinion, that no. In fact, if you were to look at that bottle of wine, Islamically, it's not even considered as halal money anyways. So therefore, let's look at Uthman ibn Abi al-As. He himself had actually spilled the alcohol for this orphan child. There was an orphan child basically And of course, Uthman ibn al-As, what was he? Well, according to these people, he was a haram police, but he was actually doing what people would call a haram police is actually called a muhtasib. What is al-muhtasib? Al-muhtasib is basically doing their duty to do public da'wah, ordering for what is good and forbidding what is bad. And there is a position, kind of like what they used to have in Saudi Arabia, al-mutawi'a. So that was considered al-muhtasib. They would be walking down the streets, just basically seeing if there's anything haram, whether to give a good way of da'wah, or to probably even go farther and do what is necessary to make sure that people are applying Islam. So you saw Uthman ibn Abi al-As, he basically went and araqa khamran liyatim, basically spilled this jug of alcohol for an orphan. And when we say for an orphan, we're speaking about that this is supposed to be very sacred money, very sacred property, that this orphan child could probably benefit from the cost of this, and probably it would probably feed them and clothe them probably for a good amount of time. But Uthman ibn al-As, because alcohol wasn't necessarily and is not necessarily considered as property, as, let's say, halal wealth, then in that situation, he didn't even have a second thought or even think twice whether he should sell it or anything like that to give the yatim or this orphan child, I guess, some benefit from this. He basically just went right there and just spilled all that. In other words, dumped all the alcohol that was there. And the Prophet ﷺ was asked if it was permissible to turn, not necessarily for this yatim, but turn alcohol into vinegar. And the Prophet ﷺ said no. وَنَهَى عَنْ ذَلِكَ. And in fact, he said that that was not permissible. And let's see. This is the hadith that in Sahih Muslim, that Anas ibn Malik had said that Abu Talha asked the Prophet ﷺ about a group of orphans that they had inherited alcohol. So the Prophet ﷺ said, ahriqha. Ahriqha means just dispose it and dump it. So then he asked them, should we not turn it into vinegar? And he said, no. That's a straightforward order by the Prophet ﷺ. Let's see, another group of scholars, they basically said, well, and let's look at who are these. Well, some scholars from the Hanbali madhab, Ahl al-Hadith means Hanbali. Okay, some scholars from Ahl al-Ra'i, which means Hanafi, and even from the Maliki and others, they said it would be permissible to turn wine or alcohol into vinegar, and it would be permissible to consume what was basically used from that. So let's say we're making pickles out of this vinegar, or we're probably marinating our chicken with this vinegar that was originally alcohol, but we're marinating our chicken with it, and or our steak with it, and probably we're also using it as an antiseptic for wounds. Is that permissible? You had some scholars actually say it was. And let's go farther. We're going to check out their evidences in just a bit. Let's see Abu Hanifa. Well, Abu Hanifa went even farther, and he said if the substance was used to, probably, we're here marinating fish and using salt, so it's definitely marinating it, and in fact, it turned it into a different substance. I don't know what, if you were to marinate fish into alcohol, what that would look like. But here they were actually making some kind of a jam with it. I mean, I would assume jam is only sweet, not something like that. So I'm just wondering if it's some kind of a sauce that they're actually calling muriya and not a jam. So I don't know, maybe what do they call that? teriyaki kind of thing? Is that what they were doing? Is that like a teriyaki? I know they use alcohol in the teriyaki sauce. So it was something like that, perhaps? They were using alcohol in this fish and marinating fish and salt together, like a teriyaki sauce or some kind of a sauce right there. And it basically turned from being alcohol to something else. So Abu Hanifa, they said that that was permissible. But you had Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, who was actually the student for Abu Hanifa. He said that you cannot use alcohol and make it turn into vinegar. In other words, things like teriyaki sauce and soy sauce, probably containing alcohol, all of that. That, hey, if you're going to use that, then you know very well that it didn't necessarily turn into alcohol, into a vinegar, but it became nothing but alcohol as an ingredient. You see it right there? I want you to just see the debate. Okay, is it now an ingredient or is it now a new ingredient? That's the question. Okay, is it a new ingredient? Is it now the same ingredient? Let's see right there. Abu Umar. Who's Abu Umar? Abu Umar is basically Ibn Abd al-Barr, a scholar from you're talking about was in Al-Andalus and from Morocco. And I think the scholars from Morocco were really not given the appreciation that they deserve, but they'll go out there and really surprise everyone that these people have been doing their homework and they have been really doing their homework in their ilm and their dedication. And Moroccan scholars are right now with Said al-Kamali, with Dadu. They're right now coming out there, and you have even some scholars from Algeria like Khairuddin Mabruk Khairuddin. Oh, you would listen and you could just, even if you don't understand much of what he is saying, just listening to the words, you just feel that there's a blessing right there. And Said al-Kamali surprising the people with their knowledge and their hifz, and these people are bombs, because these people are at the same level of ilm that the scholars in the past were on. These people, you know, you would talk about, for example, Sa'id al-Kamali. I'm reading right there from al-Qurtubi. Sa'id al-Kamali would just tell you all these opinions and even the narrations and even tell you the different, without even having a book. He'll just out of his own memory. Now that's true ilm. That's true ilm. That's what they'll be doing. They'll read the hadith and read the chain of narration and memorize all of that. That's true ilm. Okay, let's see. Ibn Abd al-Barr, he basically said, احتج العراقيون. Who are al-Iraqiyyin? Al-Iraqiyyin are, yes, Iraqis, but he's not talking about Iraqis, just, you know, some Iraqis right there in Baghdad or al-Mosul. No, he's talking about the Maliki scholars that are living in al-Iraq. There were, just like Ibn Khuwaizim he was from those scholars that were Maliki scholars in Iraq. Okay, so he basically said that the evidence that they had used to support the opinion that you could use it, things like in teriyaki sauce or probably soy sauce, and that it basically transforms into a different substance, which basically is a vinegar substance and not alcohol anymore. They basically said, well, here is the evidence. Abu Darda, that he used to eat al-muri. Al-muri basically kind of like a teriyaki sauce, I guess, in, you know, just that same substance. And he would say, دَبَغَتْهُ الشَّمْسُ وَالْمِلْحِ. He said, well, the sun and the salt, basically, دَبَغَت. How is it? Is that tanning it? No, he's not talking about tanning it. He's basically saying the same idea that the Prophet ﷺ, let's go back to why did he even use that? Well, it was the same idea right there. Okay, the same idea that the Prophet ﷺ basically had told them in this hadith, well, maybe you should have used the leather that for this dead goat and just basically right there, just tan it. Empty that substance that was impure in it, basically, which is the fluid within this leather. Just use vinegar, use salt, and then you could consider using the leather and basically فانتفعتم به, and just make use of it. So what he wanted to say, he basically used some form of qiyas, an analogy, and he said, well, what I did, certainly I used alcohol in this, whether it's fish or steak or whatever it is, and then let it stay there for some while. The sun was basically hitting it and the salt was there. In other words, he considered that it's exactly with the same analogy of using salt and the heat basically to remove the substance from that leather. The same thing, he said, it's right there. We're letting, yes, certainly, we know it's alcohol, we know it's najis, we know it's impure, but that, let's call it the chemistry of it, was changing due to whether heat or whether due to salt. In other words, an ACL right there, sodium and chlorine right there, putting it together. In other words, it's a different substance. So let's say right there, I mean, this is, of course, and he said, but here, of course, because al-Qurtubi was considering that that is not right. And he said, min wajhin laysa bil-qawi. He said, well, yes, that narration is not a strong narration, according to al-Qurtubi. And he said, that's what they had basically, Abu Umar, sorry, that was the quote of Abu Umar, which is Ibn Abd al-Barr. He said, well, that's actually, yes, they did depend on that evidence about Abu Darda, that he used to use this marinated substance and in alcohol, and he said that it turned into something else, etc. He said it's actually not a strong argument. Let's say Umar ibn al-Khattab, Uthman ibn Abi al-As, all right, and he said that they had disagreed with Abu Darda. So, wait a minute. Who's Abu Darda anyways? Well, Abu Darda is a Sahabi, okay? Abu Darda is a Sahabi, and that he was using basically alcohol, and he, he was eating al-muri. He wasn't necessarily using alcohol, but al-muri is only, which is kind of like a teriyaki sauce, is only done by using an amount of alcohol. That's the only way to do it. Okay. And he would say that, well, like we had said, that with the process of heat and salt, it turned into a different thing. Is that necessarily what Umar ibn al-Khattab agreed with? No. Umar ibn al-Khattab and Uthman ibn al-As, they basically disagreed with this murray that it was halal. And right there, al-Qurtubi said, وَلَيْسَ فِي رَأْيِ أَحَدٍ حُجَّةٌ مَعَ السُّنَّةِ. Stop. وَلَيْسَ فِي رَأْيِ أَحَدٍ حُجَّةٌ مَعَ السُّنَّةِ. No one's a personal opinion, personal statement, personal analogy is going to be going beyond or further in giving us a final report or statement whenever we would have a prophetic report. Enough said. Want you to look at that. Enough said. And here, what he wanted to say was, we cannot use Abu Darda's statement and his words of what would make permissible in terms of food just because he thought that that would make a fair analogy, and that, yes, I'm right there doing my own qiyas. And this is right there. And he said, وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ. And we would just basically seek guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just want you to look at that. Let's see. And he said, it could have been possible. So when Abu Darda had done that, so did he do something haram, or how do we understand all of this? And he said, well, it is possible that perhaps it was permissible to turn it into vinegar in the beginning of Islam, before the final statement was revealed, telling them that it was haram to do that. And of course, because at the time it was still, I guess, near that timing of that revelation, some people still, I guess, didn't get the final statement and the final understanding, I guess, absorbed and understand that, no, you can't even use it. You can't even turn it into a different thing. So right there, it's probably, it takes a long time to actually get that transformation happening. And of course, some people probably still hid it under their dungeons, or who knows where they were hiding this substance. And then probably later on, oh, it turned into vinegar. Oh, well, now we could use it for something else. And some people knew, some people didn't know. And this, of course, is what al-Qurtubi wanted to say, probably in defense of what Abu Darda was doing in terms of that, I guess we'll just call it teriyaki sauce, but it's more like a jam, but we'll just, let's call it that sauce. Okay. Let's look at it right here, this narration. روى أشهب عن مالك, that he had said, if a Christian turned alcohol into vinegar, whether it's a Christian or a Jew. So this is basically, let's say we're getting teriyaki sauce from China, from Thailand, okay? And he said, and let's just assume that, yes, this teriyaki sauce or marinara sauce, for example, yes, there is wine in it, but with that heating process, it basically turned into vinegar. And he said, فَلَا بَأْسَ بِأَكْلِهِ, that it would be permissible to consume. You want to use marinara sauce in your I don't know, spaghetti, according to this narration, that yes, you can. So why did he put that hypothetical example? Well, because it would be haram for a Muslim to buy alcohol. So you cannot go and buy, I don't know, brandy wine and say, well, I'm going to use it in my tiramisu, or I'm going to be using it in my cakes. It's haram for you to buy alcohol, period. Whether you're going to turn it into a vinegar or not, it's haram to buy alcohol, wine, vinegar, haram to turn it into, even wanting to turn it into vinegar. It's haram to buy it from the first place. But let's just assume it was a Christian person that basically turned this alcohol, this wine, into vinegar. Is it permissible? So according to this opinion, that yes, it's permissible to use. And according, let's say, and he said, وَكَذَلِكَ إِنْ خَلَّلَهَا مُسْلِمٌ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ اللَّهُ. But the same thing, let's just assume that it was a Muslim, not practicing, not very practicing, bought alcohol and then did the same thing, basically turned it into a vinegar, or probably a different substance. He said, well, even if it's a Muslim, yes, they are held accountable for buying alcohol, but if they had turned it into vinegar, it would be halal to consume, but they would be held accountable for buying alcohol. Okay, let's see. And he said, وَالصَّحِيحُ مَا قَالَهُ مَالِكٌ في رواية ابن القاسم وابن وهب إنه لا يحل مسلما أن يعالج الخمر حتى يجعلها خلا ولا يبيعها ولكن ليهريقها. And he said, and what is actually authentic is what was mentioned upon Malik through Ibn al-Qasim and Ibn Wahab, that it is not permissible for a Muslim to turn into this chemical, I guess, chemical transformation, alcohol into vinegar, and not even sell it. But the only way to deal with this is basically to dump it. Let's look at number 2. What did he want to say? Oh, Tamheed ibn Abd al-Barr. Okay, so that was basically taking it from a Tamheed for Ibn Abd al-Barr. Ibn Abd al-Barr is the same guy as this guy. Where is it? That Abu Umar, this guy. This is the same guy. Okay, let's see. Did he actually use the same source? Okay, here we go. Here's Ibn Abd al-Barr. You see it? let's see, and التمهيد. And those are huge books, by the way. And Ibn Abd al-Barr is حافظ المغرب. حافظ المغرب. Who's حافظ المغرب? Ibn Abd al-Barr. You know, I still remember when our professor, Dr. Hussam al-Din Affan, he would challenge us in many ways and many times. And it was so embarrassing to not know the answer at many times, especially in class where there, you know, girls and guys, where the girls would be in the back and the guys would be in front. But Dr. Hussam al-Din Affan, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ya Rabbi, give him a long life. He's a great scholar. I mean, a great scholar. And you cannot fall asleep or daydream in his class, period. He knows his students. He would be walking around, you know, kind of like with a person with an ADHD. He'd be going around and walking around. He would even make the wind start circling within class. And he would be going around and he would literally stand, not sit on a table in front of everyone. No, he would walk and go up to the students at the table and actually ask, who's this? And what does this wording mean? When did this happen? Etc. And I remember when he said, who's Abu Umar? Who's Ibn Abd al-Barr? And that was our first year in college. And when you're an undergrad, you're so proud of yourself to be an undergrad. And finally, going to the university kind of feels good that you're not children anymore and you're attending there. But then right there, he asked us, who's Ibn Abd al-Barr? And none of us knew. And he said, Ibn Abd al-Barr. I can hear his voice in my ears. حافظ المغرب المشهور بحافظ المغرب المشهور عند غيركم. And that was so embarrassing. He said, he is the scholar that is known to be حافظ المغرب, the scholar of the West, and West meaning the western part of Africa. And he is the famous one to be known, but famous not amongst you. And man, was that a derogatory word to use, because it was really teaching us a lesson. You got to do your homework, prepare for the class. And if there's something that you don't know, go and search for it, because you might actually be cornered with a question and get embarrassed in front of everybody that you didn't even care to go and research. Speaking about that, maybe it would be good to do some homework, right? And probably, see if you can get AI to probably translate this tafsir for you, and you can find one. And probably, follow along and make those notes and probably get some of those questions and maybe research, well, what is the ruling that the scholars had written in terms of using alcohol? Perhaps, since we're talking about alcohol, gelatin, one can probably choose to research about gelatin, and probably, good websites to go to. Islam Q&A, outstanding website. They actually did an outstanding job in laying out those opinions. Islam Web is an outstanding website. Islam Web, they actually have these great scholars that would really research and present to you in a form of Q&A and present to you the answers to those questions. So you could definitely research that. And if you don't have, let's say, the translation perhaps for that article, you could always, with Google Chrome, you would go those three dots on the top right there. Let me show you. Maybe I could show you right there for you to see it. And then you can ask it to translate. I'm going to show you so you could see it, and probably do a little research right there. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to go right there. You're going to look at these three dots. You're going to go all the way down, and you're going to translate. Let me translate this article, okay? Here we go. I'm going to translate it into English, or you can translate it into Chinese or whatever language is prefer to you. And here you go. It will translate it. And it's pretty good because we're talking about, like I said, like a 75% accuracy. That's actually great. And then you can come to class and say, well, this is the translation that I got, and this is what I understood. And then that way you can probably modify and definitely expand your ilm with that. Okay, let's continue right there. He said, لم يختلف we're right there. لم يختلف قوم مالك قول مالك وأصحابه أن الخمر إذا تخلت بذاتها أن أكل ذلك الخل حلال. He said, generally speaking, that Malik and also the scholars that followed the madhab Maliki, they didn't have differences of opinions that if on its own this alcohol turned into a vinegar on its own, it's, in other words, we didn't necessarily do the job, it was doing it on its own. And in that situation, if you came to it and you found that, oh, it actually turned into vinegar, that it would be permissible to use, which is basically the opinion of Umar Khattab, Qabisa ibn Shihab, wa ibn Shihab wa Rabi'a. And it is one of the opinions for the madhab Shafi'i. Okay, let's see. ذكر ابن خويزمنداد. Who's Ibn Khuwaizimandad? He's basically part of the Maliki scholars from Iraq. We talked about him before. He said it can actually be considered as property, since what you could do with it is you could use different substances, such as perhaps using it to maybe cure, well, as an antiseptic, or probably as I guess, like a fire extinguisher, I guess. Is it considered like a fire extinguisher? Can alcohol actually be used to turn off fires? Okay. And he said that this was not actually known, that is something to be narrated off Imam Malik, but it was probably something that يخرج هذا على قول من يرى أنها طاهرة. He said that would basically be considered a derivative from the opinion that some scholars had said that it was pure, and therefore it can be used for other substances or for other good reasons, if it's not necessarily for consumption for food like that. Okay, and he said, وَلَوْ جَازَ مِلْكُهَا لَمَا أَمَرَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم بِإِرَاقَتِهَا. And he said if it was permissible, that is al-Qurtubi right now objecting and saying, although yes, Ibn Khuwaizimandad, you had actually come with this opinion that it's permissible to own, even if you're not going to be consuming it as an alcohol, and considered that, well, we can use it for other substances, and it doesn't have to be food. And in that situation, he basically said it's permissible. So here, Al-Qurtubi was wanting to object to it and say, well, if that was permissible to use it in that way, and it was considered as basically permissible to own, then the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have ordered that it was supposed to be dumped. Because ownership is a form of use. But the Prophet ﷺ had basically told him that it was not permissible to sell and not permissible to consume and drink. Then therefore, the only thing that you can consider is that this would not be considered as a value, or even of property. Let's go on and, oh, well, actually, let's stop right here, because this is actually a whole topic to discuss, which is playing chess and using dice. Is that permissible? What about the other games, Monopoly, Candyland, those online games? I don't know, what do they call that stuff? Something on duty, whatever it is. Those games, those killing games, are those permissible to play with? Is it permissible to actually, I don't know, Matrix, or what is that called? Metrics? I don't know what it's called, but yeah, those on Super Mario Brothers. I'm just trying to remember some of those, I guess, electronic games, and you could see I'm not the expert on remembering them. When I was a little child, we used to play Super Mario Brothers, but that was basically about it. But now they basically have all these different games. Are those permissible to play? What about chess? I mean, what about chess? Is there actually a hadith that talked about chess? What about the dice? Is there a hadith that talked about dice? There is. Really? What hadith is that? Stay tuned for tomorrow. Well, what if we don't want to play for gambling reasons, just for the fun of it? Really not for gambling reasons. We just want to play, just kind of sit together and just play chess, or probably some board games, and the board games, just to kind of make family and stuff. Is that permissible? Candyland? And are you saying that Candyland, and I'm just using a dice, and Candyland is not permissible to play? Hey, what about snake bite? That snake, you basically, yeah, and it goes all the way and you start jumping onto squares. Is that permissible to do? Or is just wait a minute, let's go to a different one. Dice. We use it in math. And let's say, yeah, we're doing, I guess, some games for children in class to probably challenge them on maybe, I don't know, multiplication or certain things in class. Is that permissible to do? Is that allowed to use? And wait a minute. So is the reason behind alcohol because it causes the person to go basically drunk? Or so what's the reason behind not permitting playing with chess? Well, wait a minute. I thought you said that there are differences of opinions. Are there? Well, stay tuned tomorrow. What's the opinion on chess? And let's see. Right. Let's stay tuned tomorrow, inshallah. There's really a lot to say. And you could see right there. Then we're going to go into this ayah, and فيها 9 مسائل. Okay. Any questions before we end today?
Yeah, Bismillah.
Go ahead, Sister
Yeah,
Elaine.
we need like a chart for all that we went over today.
I know. It was
Just about
not.
the alcohol,
Just about the alcohol, definitely. Hey, maybe somebody could do that as homework, right?
Yeah.
Noura was telling me today, she was like, well, you need to work on, bringing and making the class more, I guess, more interactive and all of that. So I was like, well, everybody seems to be cooperating, doing a good job.
No, not the Tafseer necessarily, but
Not that this, okay, so we can let them not cooperate very well, I guess.
okay.
No, I'm just joking, Noura. But I think
No,
that
but honestly, like, it helps to do like to actually do the research ourselves, not just have you do it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. This is very important. So even when you
The problem is like I wanted to write a research paper on something, but then I found myself like I don't know anything,
Oh dear, no, don't say that, Noura.
No, I
No.
mean like I wanted to do it, but
we could do it differently. I'll give you keywords, okay? Keywords in Arabic, and then kind of like look at type it in, okay? And then look at the articles in Islam Web, and then keep on translating those articles and see what you can get. How about that? Let's start with that.
okay.
Okay, let's use keywords right here. We're going to use keywords, and then you're going to go to, I'm going to show you like how you could do it on Google. Okay, and let's say we're going to go like this. Okay, I'm going to go right there, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Google, and okay, or maybe we could also use ChatGPT, but we'll just hold on. Okay, and we can probably. Hey, you know what? We can use ChatGPT and let it translate for us, because it's going to be harder for you to
I'm gonna make a separate WhatsApp group for just for Tafseer so we can like share all the stuff.
Let's, you know what I'm going to do? Translate for me, translate into Arabic, the ruling on playing chess. Okay. Let's see what it would. Okay, here we go. Good job. And here we go. Then I'm going to copy and paste that. الحكم في لعب الشطرنج. Here we go. I'm going to copy that and then I'm going to paste it.
Wow.
Yeah, right there. And then I'm going to paste it right there, even if I don't know Arabic. And here we go. Now it's giving me Slam Q&A, and now it's giving me all those articles. And here we go. Islam Web right there. Ibn Baz right there. Islam Web, Islam Online. Those are actually great articles, but I don't even know what it's saying. Okay, fair enough.
Oh yeah, it says translate this page right
There
there.
you go. Translate this page, girl, right there. Translate, please. Let's see if it can translate it. It did it. Oh, there we go. Voila. You
Wow,
just translated those pages. And let's see. I'm going to open this one up. And then, yeah, well, there we go. It's Arabic. Okay, no.
That one has it anyway, right?
Well, there
Right
you go.
there.
But I know at least what it's talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. I'm going to translate this into English too. Give it some time. There we go. Voila.
SubhanAllah.
Now that was outstanding. There's not me. I didn't do the outstanding job. It did.
Oh yeah, you gave us a preview for the next class now.
Exactly. I gave you a preview for the next class because we're definitely going to, well, what about, well, I want to know what dice is before Aisha Wazwa starts talking about dice. She's going to be taking such a long time going off topic and going into circles. Give me okay, well, we can tell it, translate the use or is dice permissible in Islam into Arabic. There we go. Translate that, please. Okay, here we go. So what are you going to do? And we're going to go copy and go to Google right there. And we're going to say paste. I don't even understand what this is saying. So let's go ahead, translate all of that. Give me English. Can you see what I'm doing? Yeah, there we go. Now you got the English side of it. And let's see. It's telling me about dice. Here we go. Islam Web. And it's giving me all these different articles. And look, I don't know who that is, but yeah, you could look into it. And right there, look at this. Jami'at al-Iman. Now that's in Yemen right there. So there we go. We got a good amount of scholars and a good amount of resources right there. It's actually good to, oh, look, there's Islam Online as well. This is actually a very good website. Well, not that this one. I thought that was Sayyid al-Fawaid. Dar al-Ifta, Jordanian, the Jordan Fatwa right there. Oh, hold on. Maybe I can get you to that translated, but definitely look into that. And then you can find yourself expanding your ilm. And let's see, Islamway is an outstanding website. Let's see, Ben Baz, good website. جمعية الاتحاد الإسلامي, I don't even know who's responsible for that one, so excuse my ignorance. Let's see. We're going to go farther and, oops, hold on. Here we go. We're going to go English. Here we go. We're going to go, let's see. Adab Ain Shams. I don't know what that is. Oh, المكتبة الشاملة. This is a very important website. That's a whole library right there. It's an excellent website. So Islam Online, excellent website. I don't know though if it does translate this page. I think there's something, am I right? Let's see. Because if it translates this page, that's it. This is gold. I wonder if it does. It does. This is gold. Man, the age that we're in, this is gold, everybody. You're actually going to the actual books that we would be going to. You can make PhD dissertations on these. Can't beat that. This is amazing. So you just know which websites to go to. Islam Online is a good website. So Shia website, well, let's pass that one. And let's see, Al-Maani, that's not a bad website. What this does, it's like a whole, I wonder how it's going to do the job in translating. Hold on. So this is basically like a Arabi dictionary right there. Let's see what it does. Okay. Oh, this page couldn't be translated. I mean, I understand that would be really too hard on you. Maybe one day, AI, you'll be able to do it. Okay, let's see. If that Jordan, so this is basically the for Jordan, basically the المحكمة الشرعية, I guess, for Jordan. Let's see. دار الإفتاء المصرية. So you've got right there Al-Azhar right there, and their fatwa bank right there. So now you could see everybody. You've got really good resources. Al-Huda Center, I don't know what that is. I don't know what looks Qatari to me, but yeah. البطاقة الدعوية. Yeah, that one, they have really nice designs to, I guess, give you, you could actually share these, and they would have these really nice, kind of like a trifold and stuff. And then they would give you these things that are available for you to just make it into a trifold and then just print it out and pass it on. So yeah, that's what that website does. It's like they just have all these short articles that you can turn into trifolds, or you can turn into just a card to pass out and stuff. So that's pretty cool. Right. So, Ahl al-Hadith. This is a very, very important website too. So there you go, everybody. I'm just giving you those websites that are important. Al-Maktaba Shamila. This is right there. This is a whole library right at the tip of your fingers right there. Islam for You, not a bad website. Not my favorite, but not a bad website. Let's see, I'm going really quick just for us to kind of see how we could do this. Oh, sorry about that. Dr. Safe, I don't know who that is. Oh, Iman website. This is a great website. A very, very good website. Let's see. I'm just giving you, those websites that you really, really need to go to in order to, I guess, make use of it. Okay. Now we're starting to go into those websites that, let's see. Islam Ancient, don't know that website. Oh, Mawdua. They actually have some good articles. They have some good articles in regards to like different good articles on Islam and stuff. So definitely, just go over the video and just to know which websites are good to go to, even though sometimes it's like quite too summarized. But I think they do a good job in laying out a very good summary on a certain subject. So this is it. Okay, so now you know those websites that are definitely going to be helpful to go to, inshallah. So this is it. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik nastaghfirullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. I'm available, dear.
I'm still on hold.
You're still on hold? Oh, dear. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have many questions. I ask it one by one or...
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, on point 7, when he said here, إن الذي حرم شربها حرم بيعها.
Right.
Can we make it like قياس على cigarette and vape and shisha?
Absolutely. That's the whole thing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are mufattirat. So al-mufattir, what is al-mufattir? Al-mufattir is anything that basically has an impact or an effect on the body and can cause it to basically get sick. So things like shisha or things like we call it argile, or cigarettes, for example. Since right now we have very important factual studies that tell us right now that that cigarettes are basically increasing your chances of probably developing cancer or probably getting your body harmed, etc. And what it does to your heart, what it does to your lungs, and all these different things. So then in that situation, certainly, if it's haram to consume and haram to smoke, then it's haram to sell. But is it at the same level of alcohol? Certainly, it's not the same level because that one's al-Khaba'ith. Okay, that one is al-Khaba'ith. Alcohol is like the worst thing that you could. Alcohol and certainly drugs, they're the worst things. But then when we're speaking about cigarettes and tobacco, that's basically mufattir. It's not the same level.
Vape, the same family, huh?
It's not the same family because the person, when we're speaking about mufattirat, when we're speaking about, for example, tobacco, you don't lose your mind, okay? But when if a person is to take drugs, they're definitely losing their mind. And of course, right now, the alcohol that is cooked chemically, made from chemicals like what is that stuff? Meth is far more dangerous than wine. That would make meth even more haram than alcohol. So the more harmful it is, the bigger the bigger the haram. You know, meth is even more dangerous than alcohol. And that's why these people would be walking like zombies. So scary. Okay. And certainly if we're talking about different substances, so you kind of put it on a scale. Okay. The scale, the more the person is impacted by this, then the more haram it would be. In certain tobacco, it differs. Of course, if we're talking about tobacco, just tobacco, okay, there's a difference between adding some amount of probably marijuana, CBD, you know, just different things. It depends on what's actually in it. Okay, there's a huge difference between just taking tobacco, the traditional tobacco, and the person probably smoking it. Okay, and it's going to affect their gums, it's going to affect their lungs, but their alertness, it doesn't affect it. Okay, there's a difference between that and smoking hashish. No, with hashish, no, there's a difference. Hashish and marijuana, that's different. No, they are going into, it's smoking, but it's a different level. When a person's smoking hashish, they definitely get into some level of the loss of at least one addiction, two, loss of awareness in the world around them. That's why they go into some form of being high. Okay, so that's why being in them going high, for example, on hashish is completely different than, let's say, the tobacco that, I don't know, I guess Philip Morris sold tobacco. Okay, that's completely different. Okay, did I answer that question?
Yeah. So the income of cigarette is haram.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And the point 8 when كره مالك بيع زبل الدواب, is this the أسمدة
Oh, absolutely. You know, the different fertilizers that they're basically their droppings, they can use it as asmida fertilizers.
Yeah, but he كرهها, but it's we can't.
Right. But then رخص فيها ابن القاسم.
في اختلاف.
Right, exactly.
For الخمر turned it to vinegar. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that خير خلكم خل خمركم. Is this hadith?
No, absolutely not.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely not.
يا ما تعلمنا خطأ.
Yeah. Imagine if we're going to take that. Imagine. This would have been a key hadith here. خلاص. let's buy alcohol because the best vinegar is made of alcohol.
But because it turned يعني many stages for خل, first it خمرة, then turn to خل by process, then خل can turn back to خمر, or
it can turn. You can, it's a chemical process. They can, return it and use different substances to turn it into different things. There's, we already know that that's possible, but what we wanted to display, and what, of course, al-Qurtubi was basically right there displaying, is telling you that, yes, that opinion does exist, that it's permissible to transform alcohol into vinegar, but he's basically laying out those differences of opinions, and he's definitely not in support of that opinion whatsoever. And that's why he was basically, I guess, exposing those gaps within those opinions.
So what's on the shelf in like Walmart, all these stores, it says that the wine vinaigrette or vinegar, it's haram.
No. That's so number one, like I said, differences of opinions. The vinaigrette is not necessarily wine. Okay, that's more of a salad dressing. That's not, no. That's a salad dressing, and that salad dressing they would use an amount of vinegar in it. So correct me if I'm wrong. There's no alcohol in it as far as
because it didn't reach that stage, right?
Right. So I don't know. Do they actually use alcohol in it? Not that I'm aware of. I thought it was just a salad dressing.
I can check the bottle right now.
They write it on the
bottle. Red wine vinegar.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me see.
Red wine vinegar. That's not necessarily that it was transformed, as far as I know. I'll have to do my little research to really see.
No, I'm looking at the bottle right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Hold on.
I match it with hadith. I thought it's what hadith خير خلكم خل خمركم. Oops.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have alcohol.
So
but some of the those what do you call it, the extracts, like vanilla extract, sometimes they do contain alcohol.
Right, they do. Right, so that's because they would. They can't keep that unless they would have a medium to maintain it, and that's why they would use that alcohol. I'm going to take you to, I was just right now, as you were talking, I went to al-Albani, and here al-Albani had actually said, in regards to خير خلكم خل خمركم, he said فهذا لا يصح. He said this is basically مشهور على ألسنة الناس لكنه لا أصل له. So this is common that people are saying it, but there's no resource, no evidence to that whatsoever.
That's why we have to learn Islam.
There you go. You can't beat al-Albani with this one. That's it, right? So let's see right there. What does he say in regards to that one? Oh dear.
I think every single one of us has heard unauthentic hadith.
Here's what I'll do. Inshallah, we'll continue answering the questions. How about tomorrow, inshallah?
Same topic, isn't it?
I'm okay with that.
Yani, today you have no time.
Yeah, but inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Write down those questions, okay?
Yeah, it's already written on
and join the WhatsApp group. I shared the link in the chat.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, wa alaikum salam, Sister Khadija.
How are you?
Very good, alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. This is a really good class. May Allah reward you. MashaAllah. Please, I have a lot of questions, but this one is urgent. Please let me ask you.
Okay, fair enough. Let's do the urgent one.
So, let's say a family borrow money in the bank due to financial problem with interest. So he wasn't able to pay the money, and now it involved police arresting the wife, looking for him around. So he was now seeking for financial aid from family. Is it okay to assist in that kind of a situation?
Okay, I'm gonna say the question and tell me if I understood this right.
Okay.
This person is going through some problem financially, so he went and got a loan from the bank, and it was an interest loan, and now he can't pay it back, and now he's struggling to pay it back, and you want to assist him to pay back the loan so the interest would not double up on him. Am I understanding this right?
Yes, but the
good.
interest
Okay.
has already involved, yes.
Okay, so certainly this is considered supporting your friend to getting them out of the dilemma, even though you're really technically paying the interest. But definitely, this person, if they regret of course, making this loan, this interest-based loan, and you're right, they're not wanting this interest to double on them. So even though you're basically helping them pay the interest, but you're basically doing them a favor. So inshallah, this would be inshallah a good deed that you are doing to make sure that your friend is not caught up with that interest, even though it was a sin from the beginning. But of course, you're basically getting them out of this trap. So inshallah, Rabbil Alameen will reward you for it.
Inshallah, Jazakillah khair.
And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give your friend, inshallah, ya Rabbi, the rizq to be able to get out of this trap.
Ameen ya Rab, Jazakillah khair.
Okay, wa iyyakum, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam.